In the negative aspect of things, I chose classical education mainly because I didn't want my children darkening the door of a public school. My experience in public school, at least in high school, was something I didn't want my kids having to go through. The common perception as well of Christian schools is that they're just the public curriculum with a chapel class thrown on. A classical education that has, really says Christ is the center of everything. In Him we live and move and have our being, that He's the great integration principle that ties everything together. That is a true Christian education. That's not just about teaching things, but also the betterment of the students.
I taught in a public school, so I taught in not just straight public school, but I also have a Montessori diploma, so I taught Montessori public school. I just find that they don't live up to what children are capable of. Concepts that they had in the public school system were just so low, so they just expected less and less of the kids every year.
We have known a couple families who started doing classical education for the past few years, and just the knowledge and understanding that these children had picked up over a few years' time was really remarkable, and it just showed just their level of education was very different than the norm.
So the approach of modern education is basically it's vocationally focused. A modern school is going to teach your children what they need to know to have a successful career. Whereas a classical approach is the liberal arts approach. It doesn't treat the student's brain as a box that needs to be filled with information. It treats the student's brain as a muscle that needs to be exercised.
I actually had no idea what classical education was to start with. So when Finn, my oldest, was starting kindergarten, I started looking into options. I knew I wanted to homeschool him. I looked at Montessori, I looked at Waldorf, I looked at traditional, and then I came across classical. I thought I wanted to get in a time machine and go back and do my own education again because it made so much sense.
I like to think of classical education as the new old way. This is the way that the great thinkers of old were educated. And really it can be broken down into 3 parts: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The classical educators of old understood that any subject could be approached in these 3 categories. The grammar being the basic building blocks of the subject, your vocabulary, just the basic facts of the subject. In scripture, and especially in Proverbs, it's described as knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. So it's really helpful for me to think in those terms. So the grammar is that knowledge stage with the basic facts. Then you move on to logic, or understanding as scripture would call it. And this is where those facts begin to interrelate with one another. You begin to understand a bit of the way that these facts apply to life, and just have that understanding. The rhetoric is the application or the wisdom of the knowledge and the understanding. And so this is the time where you're using all of those facts. You're speaking, you're able to explain and teach others, debate it even, express it in your own words. So grammar, logic, rhetoric, or knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, that is the basics of classical education.
This particular school, the First Baptist Classical, is a Christian-based school. God is at the center of everything that happens. God is at the center of every class, every lesson. All the teachers are Christian, and they really love God. So that was the most important thing for us. And then obviously the classical education is a way to. For us, it's a way to ensure that our children just get the best education that they can.
I didn't know a whole lot about classical education when we first were looking at making that switch. And my first thought when we were leaning that way was, well, we can always try it. With one child in and 2 kids, and now all 3 of our kids in. Again, seeing how they learn, we would never go back, put it that way. We are so thankful that our kids are being taught in a classical education format.